Are you really eating chips right now, girl? You need to do a video. What are you doing? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess Christine. Hello, hi. And today I will be doing a very scary story time about a time I almost lost my mom to a brain aneurysm. So without further ado, let's get started. So this experience happened about 5 years ago when I was in my mid 20s. I was like 23, about to turn 24, and my mom was also in her mid 40s. And she came in from work one day, and mind you, I was in my room with my girlfriends. We were having some wine, we was listening to music. It was a group of four of us, and we was all in the room. So she comes in, and she just was complaining about that she had like a little small headache, nothing serious, nothing alarming that we would start like wondering what's going on. So she comes into the room, she says hi to my girlfriends, and then she starts to go get into her routine right away. And her routine was she would take some ice, she would crack her ice, she would put it in a small cup, and then she would just light up a Newport cigarette, and then she would just sit down in the living room watching her novelas, you know? And that was how my mom was back 5 years ago. And so we never thought anything of it. My mom never got sick like this, and she never went through anything traumatic like this when it came to her health. So we never thought anything of it. We trusted her instinct. You know, she felt like she felt okay, and that was that. So I was in my room and I was hanging out with one of my guy friends at the time. And all of a sudden, my mom wakes up and she's complaining that she had a headache. By this time, my older brother was in the house. He was in his room because there was a point where we were all living together. Uh, and she makes her way to the living room, and she's like, "Oh, just send it." Not to the living room. I'm sorry. She makes her way to the bathroom, and while she's in the bathroom, I could feel, I can tell that she's like, she feels a little bit pain. She feels like she's in pain with her headache. The motion didn't work out. She doesn't know what's going on, and all she said was, "Oh, just send it. Can you please make sure that the door is locked?" Because we lived in the projects in the Bronx, and so we always made sure that the doors were locked. For anybody who lives in the projects, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so she started getting ready to go to bed again, but this time the pain was just excruciating. So excruciating to the point that my brother felt like, okay, something's a little off for her, so we have to go check. I was still in the room with my friend because I just kept saying to myself, like, you know, I know my mom, I know that everything's okay. And if something was wrong, she would scream for help, or she would start telling us like something's wrong. All of a sudden, my brother started getting scared, and he was like, you know, I think I'm gonna have to call the ambulance because she's hitting her head. So, you know, I have never gone through a headache. I never suffered from migraines. And so I really don't know if there's anyone out there who experienced that, like, excruciating migraines, but it was so painful for her that she was hitting her head and like kind of going like this because she just couldn't stand the pain. So my brother said, you know, just calm down, just come out of the room, let's go to the living room. And as my mom was in the as my mom was coming out of the room, we started bringing up her coat, we started putting her sweats on, we started putting her Uggs on. And all of a sudden, she just started to lay down on the sofa, I guess because she was already getting very dizzy. And she just like was like laying down, and she just was just like kind of out of it. She was kind of unconscious, but not really. And I was feeling a little nervous, but I kept telling myself everything's gonna be okay, everything's fine. Like my mom is okay. Like I know that she's good. All of a sudden, she puked, and when I saw the vomit, it was actually brown vomit. It wasn't like if she had something to eat or nothing. It was kind of like brown. It was like weird. By the time she threw up, her eyes just closed, and that was it. She wasn't responsive, like at all. By this time, we heard a big bang in our door, and the ambulance came, EMT came running in, and so we started explaining to them, hey, my mom has experienced a headache, she vomited, we don't know what's going on. So they got her ready, they strapped her up in that chair that they take you away with on, and my brother had one with her first. An hour or two later, when it was like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, I ended up heading with my sisters to the emergency room. Now, at least for my family, that hospital was always not the greatest medical center that you could go to. It was always very sketchy. Every time people went there that we knew, some bad stuff would happen. And so I was already worried as it was. And on top of that, I was nervous that they're not going to take care of her. When I went to go see her, I felt a little better because I sensed like, okay, she's around a whole bunch of doctors. If by any moment she starts experiencing any weird things, she starts acting weird, I know that they'll do something to her right away. They won't just leave her laying there. So she was laying in the bed, and when we were talking to her, she wasn't really saying anything. Like she just kept saying like, kind of like that, like signaling like that she, not that she was in pain or that she was okay, like it seemed like she was out of it. And so every single time we kept calling her name, she would open her eyes, but every single time she would look at us, her eyes weren't looking at me. She was glancing at me, but she wasn't looking at me. It was the most bizarre experience ever. I can't describe to you how it was that her eyes looked, but it's kind of like looking at a doll. You know how a doll, it could be looking at you, but there's no soul in that teddy bear. There's no soul in that Barbie doll. So her eyes is kind of like just wide open, like if there's no one there. And it literally looked like that. And that, oh my goodness, like the fear I experienced that night, just by the way that she looked at me, I freaked out mentally. So I literally said to myself, no matter what happens, Jasenia, please God, because I'm a believer in God, please God, just give me the strength to go on with this process, with this experience. Just give me the strength to stand strong for my siblings, because that's all I wanted to do at this point. The matriarch of our family was already crumbling, and so I needed to find that concrete floor for my family, you know, because I lived life careless, you know. I had a mom who went to work, she came home, she handled the bills and everything. We never had to worry about anything. After a little bit, they did tell us in the emergency room after like a few hours, like, oh, your mom has internal bleeding in her brain, and so something is pressuring her. I think it was her left side of the brain, it's pressuring it, and so we're gonna have to take a little bit of that liquid out, that way it doesn't keep pressuring that part. And that's the reason why she's unresponsive, and it looks like she can see you, but she can't really see you because it's pressuring that part of your brain that's functioning with her speech and her eyesight. I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying the wrong things. I'm pretty sure I'm saying the wrong things right now. I don't know what part of the brain focuses. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm doing this off my computer and it shut off on me because I forgot to take it off sleep mode. So I don't know what part of the brain is that is in charge of speaking and seeing, but it was that part of the brain that it was just like being flooded with fluid, and so it was pressuring her brain to the point that she was losing conscious and stuff like that. For anyone out there who doesn't know what a brain aneurysm is, a brain aneurysm is, based off Google, is a weakness in a blood vessel in the brain that balloons and fills up with blood. So if you had like so it'll start off like a little tiny speck, and then it'll continue to grow like a pimple until that pimple can't hold on anymore, and then it'll burst. And then all that blood that's flowing through that vessel will start leaking out of that hole. So what neurosurgeons do is that they either clip it. That's the only thing I know. I shouldn't speak any further. They clip it so like that the blood can flow freely through the vessel without it splurging out of control, and then it going into the outer part of your brain, and then it's just like putting pressure on your brain to the point that you're starting to act weird. So the next morning, they told us that my mom had to get an emergency brain surgery. That way they can release some of that liquid. And I ended up seeing her the next day around like 11 a.m. And I kid you not, it was the most painful thing I ever seen in my life. And when I got near her face was a little swollen, and she had a little tiny hole like right over here, and she had like a tube in there, I think it was, and she was unresponsive. You know, it was like the most heartbreaking thing ever, because I love my mom so much, and she's like the best person in the world, like everyone's mom, you know. And I know that we're meant to die in this world, and we're meant to not live forever, but I just didn't think that I would go through this at such a young age and so soon. It was just so heartbreaking, because I kept telling myself like, oh my goodness, like look at my mom. Like, she's in a bed right now with a hole in her head. She's unresponsive. I can't talk to her. She doesn't know that I'm even there. She doesn't recognize that it's me because she's gone, you know? And it was just like the weirdest experience ever. By this time, my mom had already gotten transferred to Montefiore Hospital up in the Bronx. And for people who live in the Bronx, Montefiore Hospital is a really good hospital. It's a really nice hospital. There's a lot of good doctors there. I've heard a lot of good stories. I've had a good experience in the hospital, and so did my mom. By this time, she was in intensive care unit. And they looked at her brain aneurysm. They said that everything was okay, that she has like 2 or 3 more, but they're really, really, really tiny. And what they did was that they added a little tube on top so they could remove the liquid, and they had her in ICU. It was already like 2 weeks that my mom was already in, and we were able to visit her, but my mom couldn't speak. She lost her speech. She lost words. Like, she couldn't talk. Like, she could talk, like she could make sounds, but she couldn't talk, and she wasn't speaking to anyone. Like, whenever we'll be like, "Hey mom, how are you? It's me, Jasenia," she would just turn around and she would just like sit, like do something with her head that didn't even make any sense, and that didn't like pertain to what I was telling her, you know. And then whenever she would start speaking, she would speak like if she was a toddler, you know. It was heartbreaking because I just didn't know. I just didn't know much about anything. And it was just like a heartbreaking experience because it's heartbreaking when you're seeing someone so helpless. So she stood about a month in the intensive care unit because they wouldn't release her unless if she was speaking and if she was responsive, and if she knew where she was, because brain aneurysm affects everyone in a different way, and sometimes it may break you down to the point that you don't come back, and sometimes you can come back. So throughout that month, we just went to visit her. We spent time with her. My stepfather at the time would feed her, and she began to joke around. She began to laugh. She began to do weird sounds. She began to move around. She began to move her feet. When people would say her name, she would not look at them, but she would look their way. When she heard people's voices that she didn't hear about, that she hasn't heard in a long time, like her brother from Puerto Rico, that never came. That it was a long time since he's seen her. She would smile and stuff like that. One day, we went back to the ICU in Montefiore, and the doctor said, "Oh, everything is good with your mom, but for some reason she just stopped breathing yesterday night." And so I looked at him like, "What? And what are you talking about?" And he was like, "Yeah, I guess because we gave her pain medicine, and she was actually having a good night rest. She forgot to breathe, and all of a sudden, all the machines started alarming." And I guess when people pass away, or when they stop breathing or something, I think alarm starts to ring. And they said that they just kept hitting her really hard and in her chest to wake her up, and she finally woke up. By the ending of that month, my mom just started to get better. She was able to see again. She was able to start talking again. And a month and a half later, she was downstairs in one of the rooms, and she was talking again. She was talking. She was seeing me. She was there. She knew that I was there. She was my mom again. But she was just like a little different. And because of this experience, my mom stopped smoking cigarettes, and she just became a different person. And like, she's in her room snoring right now. And she's like back to completely 100%, but she's different. She's my mom, but she's different. Because of that experience, I love more. I'm very compassionate of other people's experiences. I'm very understanding, and I've gotten rid of all the negativity. I do want to end the video by saying that, don't take things for granted. Love the people around you. Love the friends that you have that are really good to you, that are real to you. And don't focus on anything that does not matter, because the moment you go through something big, those things you worried about don't even matter. Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Jess Christine, for those of you who don't know, and this is a wrap.